Hey everyone, welcome to Wiki's preview for round 2 of the NRL. We're going to have a look at NRL Fantasy and NRL Supercoach. General plan for this video, similar to last week, except now we've obviously got some actual footy to talk about. So we'll go through quickly what happened last week, what's happening with Fantasy and Supercoach, either price changes, captaincy picks, popular traded in and traded out players, all that stuff. And we'll go through the actual teams for this week, what the changes are, and how that might impact your Supercoach or NRL Fantasy teams. For next week onwards, we're going to ask for some Q&A questions from people on our Discord or people on socials. This week, it's pretty obvious to see what some of the problems are that people are going through, and there's a lot to talk about and dissect from round 1. As always, guys, you can go through our Linktree or our website, but our Linktree has links to everything. By the time that you see this, we'll have updated these with a lot of NRL Round 2 links. But pretty much, you can follow us on socials. You can join our Discord, our newsletter. All this stuff's free to join, by the way. You can play Draft Stars. That's paid daily fantasy sport. So you can make a team literally just for one game. I think this Thursday we've got a 30K contest. So there's $30,000 worth of prizes just for the Thursday night game. We've also got like a Google spreadsheet that I've made up with expected minutes, goal kickers for every team. I'm probably going to try to add in left and right side of the field either this round or next round. So I'll update that for round 2 before you guys see this video. And a bunch of other stuff. Like, for example, if you're into punting, we're going to have a punters preview article, YouTube video, and a podcast episode as well, just like we do with fantasy. So feel free to check that out if that's what you're interested in. But let's get straight into it, guys. NRL round 2. Obviously, we had Team List Tuesday. Just a quick note for fantasy and Supercoach players that might not have known this. Teams come out every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Sydney time on NRL.com. It's the first thing on the homepage as soon as you log in there. But we'll go through it very quickly, team by team, and then we'll get into the fun stuff of sort of price changes and captaincy picks and all that stuff on NRL.com, Fantasy, and also NRL Supercoach. So first up, this is going to be an absolute cracker. So the Panthers obviously that's 2 games in a row they've lost 13-12 at home. One was the World Club Challenge, obviously, and then last week on Friday night against the Broncos. Obviously, a lot of people would be surprised that given the way the Broncos finished last season, for them to upset the reigning back-to-back premiers at home in Penrith, that was a huge surprise. But similarly, I think with the Rabbitohs, them losing, they did beat the Sharks actually, but they had a couple of big injuries out of it. Totola, he got a HIA concussion in the first minute, which is pretty gruesome to watch actually. And then they had Jai Arrow, who did his hammy. He's definitely out this week, and he might actually be out for another week or two, given how that looks. Aside from that, though, the Panthers, let's have a look. So Scotty Sorensen, he's out. He was on the bench last week. Aaron Totola, as I discussed. The changes here. So Tom Burgess, he ends up starting for Totola being out. Cheekamp, he was actually starting the game an hour before kickoff. He was actually starting. So he did start last game, and he's going to be starting again. So he holds that second row spot away from Jairo, obviously being injured. Aside from that, Moale and Mitchell had to play big minutes last week. They probably won't have to play as many minutes as they did last week, because obviously Arrow and Totola barely got to play. But look for them to have increased roles as well. If you don't have them already, by the way, I wouldn't be trading them in, because they've got Havili, Sele, obviously Totola next week, most likely, and then Arrow. Like, there's a lot of forwards that are about to come back soon. So if you had them already in your team, great. It worked out better than you probably expected, and you're probably going to get a few more price rises out of them, which would be great. But I wouldn't be trading either of those guys in. On the Panthers side, I think nothing too surprising. In the preseason, there's a lot of talk that Brian To'ola is going to get his left wing position back, but Taruva was playing there. That's just like a quick one to note. Aside from that, like the Rabbitohs, Ilias had a great game, and they obviously went to the right quite a bit. I think Cam Graham scored at least 1 try, if not 2. He was really good on the right edge for the Rabbitohs. Going to the next game, 6 p.m. game, this is going to be another cracker. The Sharks had a good win. Sharks had a loss to the Rabbitohs, and the Eels also had a loss to the Storm. Both of them played reasonably well, but I think they'll both expect to play a lot better this week. I think for the Sharks, the big one's Nico Hines. For Fantasy and Supercoach, he was talked about, obviously, like, he might be missing 1 week. There's rumors that he's going to miss multiple weeks. Now it's obviously been 2 weeks. He hasn't been named. according to all the rumors, like it's most likely that he probably misses one more week. But again, I think everyone out there is just guessing at the moment. So I think for now, if you picked up Trindle, especially in NRL Fantasy at a cheap price, well done. He scored a try last week. Nailed a couple of sideline conversions, and I think he got a try assist or two, and could have actually had one more. I think there was a forward pass in there. There's a drop ball on the left side. I forgot if it was Trindle or Moylan, but anyways, they were very. I think Trindle, you'll see, you should actually play a lot better this week up against the Eels. Probably not as strong as the Rabbitohs as well. This should be a really fun game to watch. In terms of team changes, Wade Graham, he contested. I don't know why he did this, but he contested the high shot. Who did he get last week? I think it was Moale that he absolutely smashed. But he did get him high, and yeah, it was never going to look good. Wade Graham, unfortunately, misses out for 4 weeks now. Williams is out as well, so it actually doesn't make a huge difference. They've actually got a pretty stacked pack. Tracy comes in as the utility, and Royce Hunt is back from injury. And the main changes for them. For the Eels, Lumi, not a massive, probably not his fault that he's getting replaced, but Sean Russell, he was out. I think it was suspended for 1 week, but he's back and he's ready to go. So he's back on the Eels, wing. So Cartwright, Dury, Hopgood, obviously Hopgood, fantasy or Supercoach, he was an absolute gun. Did really well. People are even considering for captaincy, and I think that's actually fine given that Maddo's not back till Ryan Madison's not back till round 4. Lane's probably not back till after that. Nathan Brown still isn't even on the team list. So I think if you're going to go Captain Hopgood this week and probably next is your time. A little bit of a pod option up against Cleary, who's up against the Rabbitohs, which should be a tricky game. Going into, I think I'll move on to the next game. Nothing much else here to talk about. With the Broncos, the big one is Reece Walsh. So obviously Cobbo was playing fullback, Arthurs was wing, but now Walsh comes back or comes into the starting Broncos side as the fullback. Their big signing, and then Cobbo goes back to the wing. That actually looks like a really bloody good back line. So you've got, Walsh and Mam, the two live wires, Cobbo, Staggs, Farnworth played excellent. I think he scored 2 tries as well. At least 1 try looked really good. And then Oates, obviously the veteran. And then Reynolds put some class at the top. That's actually a really bloody good back line. And then you've got the Haas, Carrigan, in the forwards, obviously Capewell, Ricky, all right. And then to Powers and Old Head. Like that Broncos team, especially playing at Suncorp, is going to be pretty good to watch this year and should put up a good fight against the Cowboys, who are a really settled lineup. I'm just trying to think if they've got any. No, neither team has any sort of big outs. Ayers obviously on the edge of this season. Aside from that, really not too much to talk about for either team. So I'll scroll through. Roosters and Warriors. The Roosters got upset by the Dolphins last week. Like I genuinely thought they were going to put a cricket score on the Dolphins, and obviously they ended up losing by, I think it was 6 or 12 points, but not a good result for the Roosters. And since then, they've got Matthew Lodge. If you saw the photo of him, it's bloody scary. He's got like a dent in the side of his head. So he'll be out for at least a month, apparently, if not longer. Egan Butcher, I think he got sin binned, I think, from memory, but it looked like he was going to miss a couple of weeks, but luckily for the Roosters, he hasn't. So he'll be playing. Radley had a pretty bad concussion last week, and I think this is less than 7 days from that. So I've got a feeling that he's going to end up sort of like missing out last minute. But again, we don't know for sure until an hour before kickoff. But I just don't see how he recovers from that head knock and plays within 7 days of the incident. So that'll be one to look out for. The other one is Brandon Smith. So I don't think there's anything official on him, but Felice Kafusi bloody hammered him. And it looked like he had some pretty badly busted ribs. I think a lot of people are trading him out this week based on the fact that he does look busted. He may potentially be a laid out. And obviously they've got their bye coming up, I think in round 3 or 4 this year. So just one to be wary of. I wouldn't drop him just because he had 1 bad score. But if you think he's playing busted, that he might be ruled out, and he's got the bye coming up, and you can actually do something really good with that money. Personally, I'm doing that actually in my team. So I think only trade him out if you're really happy with what you're doing with him. Don't just trade him out because he had one poor score. Because you look at this pack and like he's going to have to play big minutes because they're missing more than half their forward pack. Aside from that, Manu's that's right, Joseph Manu's back. How did I miss that? There you go. Joseph Manu's back for the Roosters, which will add some class. But I think like they had Sam Walker, Kiri Tedesco, and Suwali last week. So it's not like they didn't have a good backline, and they're up against the Dolphins and they got smacked. So I don't know how much of a difference Manu's going to make, but I definitely know that the forward pack is going to have to step up. So that'll be really interesting. Now, if Radley's out as well, that almost cements Brandon Smith having to play lock. So you'd expect like Turpin to get another sort of like 50 minutes or even more at hooker. That'll be an interesting one to look at. From the Warriors' point of view, I don't think they've got any big ins or outs. Nope, not really. Pretty much the same side. I think might be exactly the same side. A lot of people are considering Jackson Ford, and I've seen him as like a pretty popular trade in, or like people really happy that they picked him up. I just don't see how he's going to play. I think he did play 80 minutes last week. I don't see how he continually does that. Like I think I said this in last week's video, but you've got Barnett, you've got Tohu Harris, you've got Josh Curran, and then you've got I'm missing someone here, but they've got Jazz Tavanga. He's coming back as well. Like, there's a lot of guys that could either play second row for a little bit or at least compete for minutes. Curran played stuff all minutes. I think he played like 15 or 20 minutes last week. He was one of their better forwards last year. I don't see that happening for a long time. I think he's just coming back from injury, and you've got Tavanga to come back in as well. So I think Jackson Ford, if you've got him, well done. If you don't, I would not be trading him in. And I think that's definitely a hill that I'm ready to die on. But yeah, aside from that, we'll move on to the next game. 5:30. This should be a really good game. The Raiders had a close loss to the Cowboys away from home, and they'll unfortunately have to go back to Queensland again to play the Dolphins. I think this game is at Redcliffe. From memory, it's weird that they don't have that on there. But Dolphins, super impressive last week. I think Tabuai-Fidow, Isako, they're pretty popular trade-ins. They both played really well last week. Obviously, Isako's got the goal kicking. I'll chat about them a little bit later in the video. Marshall King was excellent last week. He had a line break that led to just like scooted out dummy half from memory and then stood up their first ever try for Tabuai-Fidow, which is excellent to watch. Forward pack, unfortunately, Ray Stone's out. So if you had him in fantasy or in Supercoach, he's out. Definitely not a trade out. He got like 30 points, I think, roughly in NRL Fantasy. I assume pretty much all in base. I wouldn't be touching him. I think he should be out just for 1 or 2 weeks. Just hold him. He'll make you cash sort of slowly throughout the season. Rapana, I forgot what he did, but it was something stupid, so he's suspended for 3 weeks. So they've got Albert Hopewadi now on the wing. And unfortunately, Josh Papali is still not back. So Pasami Solo is still there. I think with both of these teams, this game is going to be a bit of a lottery. Like with the Raiders, they were crap in the first half. I think they were losing 18-6. So it was the fact that they got back to 18-18, was that like a big effort, and they're not going to be able to replicate that? Or on the flip side, did the Dolphins go all in on round one to get up for that game against the Roosters? And maybe they're going to have a down week. Like the Dolphins is their second ever game, and the Raiders are a bloody inconsistent team with no Rapana, with no Savage, with no Papali, and Danny Levi starting at hooker. Like, I think this game, anything could happen. It'll actually be a fun game to follow because you just have no idea who to tip, who to punt on, whatever. One player that I may talk about later, but in case I forget about him, Connolly Lemuelu. He got 60 plus points, I think it was. Like, he did really well in NRL Fantasy, scored a try, so I'm sure he did really well in Supercoach as well. I'd be really wary of him, or like trading him in this week. Bench edge back rowers and like almost never good fantasy or Supercoach options. So yes, he did well last week. He actually played really well if you watched him in real life, like from a footy perspective as well. I would not be trading him in this week. I'd wait for at least one more week just to see what their rotations are like. I think Kenny Bromwich moved to the middle because Lemuelu scored his try on the left. Is that going to happen again? What's their sort of forward pack rotation? You'd want to have 2 looks before you commit for something like that. But if he does get I want to say 45 or 50 minutes or more this week, then I'd be trading him in NRL Fantasy because he's available at center. I think he'd be a great option. Supercoach, I'm not too sure whether you want someone like that's not going to play the 80 um, coming off the bench. I don't know if you trade him in. If he scores another try, he'll have a really low break even. He'd be a good cash cow, so you'd maybe looking for that. But wait and watch on Lemuelu at least for this week. Raiders, there's nothing really too much to talk about, so I'm gonna move on to the next game. One thing I will say, Tapine didn't have the best stats. Look, to be fair, he played a big stint in that first half where they were defending for most of it, and they were playing the Cowboys, really strong pack. So hopefully for us, I think I've got Tapine in both comps. If not, I definitely have him in one of them. Hopefully he repays us against the Dolphins pack in a game where he's going to have to step up. Like Papali's still missing. He's going to have to play big minutes. I think Ricky was like a little bit wary of playing in big minutes in North Queensland in week 1 in the heat as well. So hopefully he gets some more minutes and he's a lot more impactful this game, and they're not just bloody defending for the first 30 minutes when he's on. Storm Bulldogs, this should be interesting because the Storm played really sort of gutsy footy last week. Obviously, like Munster came back with a compound fracture. Grant got the match-winning try, like just really gutsy performance. And now they maintain that record of not having lost a round 1 game for 20 odd years. The whole time Craig Bellamy has been there. The Dogs were abysmal. I think it was 31-6 or something that they lost. Manly carved them up. I didn't watch this game, unfortunately, but from what I heard, it was pretty close. It was like 12-6 or 6-all or something. And then Kyle Flanagan got like a bit of a bullshit sin bin, and that somewhat turned the game, and then the Dogs could just never get it back after that. I think, but unfortunately, the Dogs are then traveling to Amy Park as well. So I think this game, from a tipping or punting point of view, again, it's going to be a really hard one to predict. But the way I look at it, if they've got Munster missing, they've got Pappenhausen missing, still got a lot of their forward pack that's moved on or sort of like at least new to the club, if not missing. It's still a relatively sort of weaker Storm outfit than what we're used to from years gone by. Whereas the Dogs had a crap first round start. But if you sort of look at their team, like they've got pretty much the cattle that they're going to expect to have. Like they'll have Pangai Jr. back maybe sort of 2 or 3 weeks from now. But that's pretty much it in terms of like what they're missing. Because who is it? Not Ryan Sutton. Their other forward, Luke Thompson. That's one. Luke Thompson, the British Bulldog. He's going to be missing for half a season. So it's like for the Dogs, I think they had a really bad outing first up, but I can actually see some improvement because they still do have Burden. They've got Burden and Addo-Carr from last year. Marnie had a great game last week. They've got Sutton and Kickout in the pack that are new as well. Like I think they'll play better than they did last week. And the Storm are missing now Munster as well. Like, could that mean the Dogs get close? We'll have to wait and watch. But I think just quickly from a fantasy point of view, I think people are going to be rushing to get rid of Burden. I think you've got to give him one more week. Like if you obviously had a really good second half to 2022, and if you got him in your fantasy or super coach team, I just don't see why you trade him out after 1 week when they obviously had a crap game as a team. I reckon just hold at least 1 more week, see how he goes. Nothing else really. Do not trade in Tyron Wishart. He's probably going to have like 2, maybe 3 games in the halves, and then he's going to be a bench utility again. So it'll be a really crap auto emergency risk for Supercoach, and just it'll stall any money making from an NRL fantasy point of view as well. Warbrick, I personally left him out last week just because they had a tough game up against the Eels, but I'll be playing him this week because my other guys like Khan Pereira were absolute crap. So hopefully Warbrick delivers for a lot of us that are playing him. All right, next game, Tigers Knights. The Tigers had a lot of hype going into round 1. Obviously Coruscant, Clemmer, Papali coming into the team, and they already had sort of really strong middle forwards like Twal and Offan Gowie, and also Kamanu was hopefully going to be in much better shape than he was last year. But they were pretty disappointing, to be honest, against a Titans team who also really shouldn't be a top 8 team. So it was pretty disappointing for the Tigers to lose at home against a Queensland team that is most likely going to be a bottom 8 team. So disappointing start to the season for them, but they're up against the Knights, who also lost in round 1. and are probably going to be somewhat around them on the ladder this year. So hopefully the Tigers can put up a good account for themselves. Fanua Borland misses out for the Tigers. Adam Elliott misses out for the Knights. Nothing really from a fantasy point of view that's really worth talking about. I think a couple of people I saw on the NRL Fantasy Fanatics forum and a couple of other places had Coruscant and Brooks. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with them really as picks in the preseason, but with the score they've got, and you're going to have to be pretty ballsy to keep them. I think with Coruscant, look, he's obviously barely had a preseason. I think Sheen's even talked about the fact that he's obviously had a lot less of a preseason than other players, and they're going to warm you into the season. I honestly think just cut your losses. He's going to take a few weeks to get up to match fitness. Then you'll have maybe 7-8 rounds of sort of playing a lot more minutes than he has in round one. But then he's potentially going to be missing due to Origin anyway. It's also the Tigers. Like, you just can't trust them as a team. He might be one that you just trade out, cut your losses after round one. Whereas Brooks, honestly, like, I don't know why people picked him. But I think if you have, you can't let one score get in the way and just trade him out straight away. He's a back. He could light it up against the Knights and then start making a lot of cash after that. So I think if you have Coruscant, trade him out. If you have Brooks, I'd give him one more week at least just to see how it goes. If you don't have Dewey, get him in. He looked great, scored a try. Just looks really impressive. Has his hands on the ball a lot as well. Aside from that, I think Laurie and Nofaluma had decent stats last week. You hope that they sort of get up and going and as the Tigers improve. For the Knights, it was really sad to see Ponga HIA late in the game with the game on the line. Hopefully he can do a lot more this week and sort of build on his combinations. I think in one of our punters preview articles, I called out Lachlan Fitzgibbon as a really good try scorer or anytime try scorer play because Ponga and Fitzgibbon on the left side, and then Fitzgibbon scored a minute into the game, which is pretty cool. Frizzell got a HIA early. I'd actually look at him maybe a week or two from now. Highly doubt that he's going to ever get a look back into Origin at this stage in his career. So Frizzell leaks money, just like Tavita Totola. He might actually be like a decent buy with his good buy schedule if he's a lot cheaper in NRL Fantasy and Supercoach. Aside from that, I don't think there's too much. I'd be looking out for Greg Marju. He's one that I didn't know about. I really thought Heimel Hunt had that left winger spot. I was really excited. I played him in every comp and obviously scored a try, which is awesome. But unfortunately, Marju's back on the extended bench and he could even get the spot back off him. Sorry, what am I saying? Not Heimel Hunt. Am I saying Heimel Hunt? Yes. Sorry, Heimel Hunt, he could get the spot off him in final team. So watch out for that. Lachlan Miller did reasonably well stats-wise. Hopefully can continue getting tackle breaks for anyone that owns him. Sorry, move on to the next game. Last game for the round, the mighty Dragons against the Titans. Oh god, this is two teams that unfortunately I don't think would make the 8. I think Dragons could be very close to the wooden spoon, given what the Dolphins showed us last week. In terms of their team, DeBellin's out from a calf injury, I think, or shouldn't be too much longer, but DeBellin's obviously not named for round one. Jack Bird gets that lock spot. He could be a really nice option at center in NRL Fantasy for anyone sort of gutsy enough to play him in your centers straight away. But he's also, I think, coming back from injury, so I'd be wary. I personally don't want to spend 600k on Jack Bird. Even if he is available to be picked in the centers in NRL Fantasy, I'll be waiting on him for like a week or two. Hopefully DeBellin comes back next week and we get like a proper indication of where Bird's going to play and what kind of minutes he's going to get. I think Murdoch Basila is a really poor pick for people taking him into their teams. He's 30 plus. He's not going to be able to play 80 minutes in the back row. And if he does, because of their team being short on forwards, he's going to have a really poor work rate. And you're not sort of expecting the attacking stats that he used to get earlier in his career. He was a really good try scorer in the Super League from memory. You're just not going to get like the attacking output because he's playing for a poor team, or the work rate because he's just not that type of player. So I think he's the one that I'd definitely be staying away from. Sloan as well, like poor work rate. He's like a Tabuai Fudo type of guy, has speed, has class, but he's not going to really have many opportunities and he doesn't have much work rate. So I'd be staying away from him as well. Brimson played well last week. Boyd played reasonably well. Foreign had some nice touches, but he could be late out due to injury. Aside from that, Tino was really poor stats wise. He's another one where you picked him for a reason. He had like that really great run of stats in the last sort of 5-6 weeks playing at prop at the end of last season. I've picked him. I think it's in my NRL Fantasy or one of my teams, NRL Fantasy or NRL Supercoach. Either way, I'm not touching him. Like he had really impressive stats at the end of last season, and you can't just give up on him as a gun after 1 week. Looking at that pack, they've got a utility in Campbell. He could potentially be starting if Foreign's out. Like Brimson could go to 5'8", Campbell could go to fullback. Regardless, I think you've got Fotuaika, Clark, and McIntyre to get middle minutes with Tino. I think his minutes might not be super high, like it might be around 50 or 55, but you just hope up against the Dragons pack this week, he really shows you something. And look, to be fair, if he has another poor week in terms of stats and sort of fantasy and Supercoach output, then yeah, get him out of there. But I think you got to give him one more week as a gun in your side. So that's it for the teams review. I'm going to move on. First, I'm going to go through NRL Fantasy. Again, this is footystatistics.com, made by one of the guys on the NRL Fantasy Fanatics Forum. By far my favorite resource for NRL Fantasy. And to be honest, probably for Supercoach as well, just because it's so easy to go through information on here. I thought it'd just be really cool to, because it's early in the year, just sort of keep these videos a little bit more generic and high level and cover sort of like overall trends that are going on. And then in a couple of weeks, when we sort of have enough information to go off in the new year, I can start doing Q&As and getting sort of user questions and stuff as well. So looking into, this is all for NRL Fantasy, by the way. I don't think there's too much to tell in terms of ownership, but the who's hot and who's not section pretty interesting. So looking at who's hot, Hopgood, if you didn't have him, bring him in. Don't overthink it. Cartwright, I think it's fine to bring him in this week because he's still under 300k, I think, from memory. But regardless, like, just fix your mistake, bring him in. He had really, really good game stats wise, at least last week. Ilias, I think that's silly. He had one amazing game. You know, it's probably man of the match. I assume he was man of the match. Scored a try. I think he had 2 try assists to Campbell Graham from memory. Played really well, but you don't bring him in just off one performance. You know that the Rabbitohs go to their left. It's just that this game, they happen to go a lot to their right. I don't think Ilias is going to sort of like significantly improve this year to the point where you trade him in after one performance. Tabuai Fido did really well last week, and I think he's available in the centers. Yeah, he is available in the centers. So I think given that, you could probably bring him into your centers, and I think that's okay. But at the end of the day, the Dolphins had one really good performance, and Tabuai was super involved. Are both of those things going to continue for the rest of 2023? My money's on no, so I'm not touching him. But if that helps you with your team because you were stuck with like an Alamotti or what's called Tommy Talau, if that's the case, sure, that's an upgrade if you've got cash left over. But I wouldn't be rejigging your whole side just to bring him or an Asako in. I think that's just silly based off one performance. Josh King, the Storm pack is genuinely stuffed, and they are genuinely short on middle forwards. So I think like he's actually a reasonable pick, but you know that's most likely going to be short term. Lemuelu, as I said, I think it's okay because again it plugs your centers. But again, I personally will be waiting one more week. And look, if he gets that 50 plus minutes on the edge, he can score like another 40 plus with a lot of base. I'd look at him, but he's already priced, I think, close to a 30 average. So I think it's a gutsy pick, you know, like he could go off for 2 or 3 weeks of the next 5 and he becomes an awesome cash cow, plugs your centers, and it's a great pick. I'm personally going to watch another week. Going into who's not, Munster's out for somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, fair enough. Radley got a low score last week, was concussed. I reckon he misses this week because of concussion. Don't know why that many people had Radley. But then on the flip side, if he does play, the Roosters are stuffed for forwards, and he could actually get bigger minutes and sort of bigger scores than usual. So him and Brandon Smith are in the same boat. Radley got smashed. Radley had a concussion. Brandon Smith got smashed in the ribs. If they do play, I reckon they're good picks and you want to keep them. But if they don't play, I reckon trade them out because they've got to buy in a couple of weeks anyway. So those two are really interesting. Garner apparently only got about 50 minutes. Didn't play that well. The Panthers lost. and he's kind of a pricer, so I reckon like fair enough, people are trading him out. Burden, I reckon you should stick with at least for 1 week. I think it's silly to sort of pick him based off his half of the season last year, an improved dog side, and then give up just because they had one poor loss to the Sea Eagles, and obviously he didn't do too much. I don't know why people had Coates anyway, but I think if you did, why would you trade him out after one game? That makes no sense. Blaw, I forgot if he's named or not, but no, he is named this week. Again, he's a cash cow. Like Bateman still isn't named unless you're jumping to like an obvious cash cow that you missed that did really well. I don't see why people are trading him. Race don't trade him. He's going to be missing a week or two, I reckon, based off the mail that I've seen, and just there's no reason to trade him again. Arrow, don't know why people had him, but fair enough. He's got a hammy strain. He's probably he's at least out for this week. Probably misses a week or two more. Fair enough. AKP, we we knew he had no base stats. We knew he was all tries. He didn't get any tries. If you're jumping to another cash cow you missed, that's fair enough. Captaincy wise, I thought this was really interesting. Like obviously with no Hines, a lot of people had to, or pretty much chose to go Cleary. I get that. 36% was pretty interesting for me. And then like Murray, Grant, Tedesco. I love how a lot of non-active guys picking Hines, but Murray, Grant, Tedesco, let's just say Trell and Hopgood. Like obviously Grant and Hopgood, or Grant did well, Hopgood did really well. Trell got early 60s, so he did all right. Teddy did not work out well for most people, and Murray. I think Murray and Grant both got sort of mid to late 60s. Latrell got early 60s. Hopgood got 80-ish or early 80s. So I think, those are all decent options, and then Teddy didn't do so well. I'm personally, first I didn't even pick Cleary. So I went Murray captain last week. I'm going to go him captain again this week. It depends on what your aims are for the season. For me, I've got no reason to be happy with like a top 1K or a top 2K or whatever rank. For me, I just want to try to win it, and I'm happy to take as many risks as possible. So I told you I already didn't have Cleary. I'll probably go Murray again and just play like captaincy roulette with some of the middle forwards and who I think will get big minutes, could score tries. Very quickly, top gainers and losers. Obviously, Hopgood again. If you don't have him, just get him in. Don't think twice. Isako is an interesting one. I personally wouldn't be getting him in, but if you think the Dolphins could do well for the next month, I obviously read them wrong in game one. If you think you can plug in a spot in your team, make some money for you while he's at it, not the worst option. I get that. Nichols wouldn't be trading him in. He scored a try last week. He did have really good stats, but he's not going to be doing that every week. Ilias, I think is a silly trade. Had a great game last week. Don't see that being repeatable. Josh King, I think, could make some money for you and get some good points for you. So if you need a mid-ranger, I get that. That's cool. Cardi, think good trade. You can't trade him in after this week because it's too close to all the power forwards coming back, and he would have already made the best part of 100 grand. So you either trade him in if you don't have him, or you just leave him for the season pretty much. Lemuelu, I think you should wait 1 week just because he's playing for the Dolphins. He had scored a try last week. He's a bench edge back row at the moment. But if you do want him, get him into your centers now. Like you can't wait till next week because he's kind of then again, put on like 80K on his price and it's just too late. So you either get him in or you don't. I think you shouldn't. Same with Cardi, get him in or you don't. I think you should. Top loser, this is gonna be really fun. Like I think in 2 to 3 weeks, we should have like a handful of guys that have dropped close to 100K and you can kind of take your pick. I think current stacked Warriors pack, I would not be touching him even in a couple of weeks. Totola is one, like they've got a really good buy schedule. He's not going to play Origin. I actually would look at him. If he comes back next week, he'll lose another, let's just say 30K, maybe 20K, like the week after. It's like by the end of round 4, he would have lost 100K. And I think him and Frizzell are two that you could consider based on sort of your team and your makeup. Coruscant, I'd be staying away from, as I said. And Burden, I'll actually be looking at potentially trading him in if he keeps leaking cash, because I think it could be like last season when the Bulldogs started slow. They just needed some time. Marnie, kick out, coming into the team. TPJ back round 4 or 5. If he's dropped 100K, I think we could see the best of him. After that, what I thought would be cool is I'll actually go through my team. I should be clear that I've never got a a top 100 finish or anything like that in NRL fantasy. I'm really good with sort of knowing the NRL and knowing the teams and players and forward pack rotations and all this kind of stuff. And obviously our company does models for draft stars, which is very similar to NRL fantasy. But I'm not someone who's won the comp before or anything like that. So take my sort of advice with a grain of salt, and obviously see what's best for your team as well. But as you can see from my team, I think I've made one trade. I've gone Brandon Smith for Reece Walsh. Honestly, it's not because I panicked and sold Brandon Smith. It's just because my backs were a joke. I had Alamotti and I think AKP where Walsh is now, and who's the other guy? Talau in the center. So basically, aside from Teddy, I had 4 rookies. I went into the season accepting that was going to make for a roller coaster ride, but I just thought, like, with a couple of minor changes, like I brought Warbrick in because he's got an E2 matchup, so that helped fix one of my 4 spots aside from Teddy. And then I thought, look, if I can get Reece Walsh in, he's very low ownership because he missed round 1 for the Broncos. And if I can get him in instead of Brand Smith, I know Boyd doesn't look great, but I've got faith in him to do a reasonable job getting the goal kicking and sort of like the kick meters for the Titans. And they're obviously up against the Dragons this week. So I'm more than happy with this team generally. And I'm going to be doing the loophole with Kepi in this spot and see who does better out of Talau and AKP. The difference between 7 points and maybe 11, I reckon. But yeah, really excited about bringing Walsh in. Low ownership percentage means that Teddy, Walsh, and I reckon as long as Hunt does play, I'll be pretty confident that like Hunt and Warbrick will go all right as well. Alamotti, if he gets close to 20, I'll be happy. So I'm really happy with my team generally. Trindle got another week, some more cash what's called increases, and I reckon he could probably get like that sort of 35 to 40-ish score pretty consistently. And I'm hoping Hines isn't back to around 4, so that'll be 3 weeks of Trindle playable in my team. And then I'll have to somehow piss off Preston, AKP, or Talau. I'm hoping Stone's back next week because I think he's good for about 30 or so points as well. But anyways, pretty happy with my team. I know 803, a score of 803, and a ranking of 17,000 does not look great. But I'm really happy with Murray as captain. I'm pretty much happy with everyone in my team. Now that Talau and AKP, only one of them scoring and I can loop. Yeah, pretty happy with my team overall, and let's see how we go after the first sort of 3-4 rounds. So Supercoach, let's have a quick look at Supercoach. NRL Fantasy, as I said, guys, like I've been sort of on that NRL Fantasy Fanatics forum for like 10 years, reading hours a day of forum updates and late mail and strategy and stuff. Whereas Supercoach, I basically do for fun. So I'm not going to proclaim to be some sort of expert, but I will just go through trends and very quickly just cover like who's been traded in and out, all that kind of stuff. Looking very quickly at, let's start with the captains. That'll be really fun to sort of dissect. So Nathan Cleary, again, most popular captain. I think here in Supercoach, I do have him in my team, but there's no way I'm going to captain him just because I know he's the most popular player in the game, and I don't think he's like statistically clearly the best player. As you can see, even with their prices and their averages, like there's quite a few options that are sort of above 800k. So I think personally, I think the Panthers have had a lot of success, and I don't like teams that are successful. So I've got a little bit of bias in there. But I just think that if there's clearly that many players, at least a handful of players above 100k, 800k, you've actually got a lot of captaincy options. So there's just like no reason to go, oh, I'll captain Cleary. I think that's unnecessary, especially early in the season. I'm just happy to take a few risks. So looking at this, there's 2 people above 20%. From memory, I went Teddy. I thought they'd smack the Dolphins. They didn't. It ended up badly. Cleary was a safe option. I think he did all right last week. Aside from that, Grant obviously did well. Scott a try at the end. Trell would have done all right as well. I think what'll be interesting is picking a captain for this week. I'll go to my team in a second. That's right. I've gone Teddy vice captain because I think he plays on the Saturday at 3 o'clock, I think it is. David Fifita plays on the Sunday, plays against the Dragons in their first game of the season. He already had he set up their first try from memory with like a really good line break and try assist. And I've got confidence in David Fee to do well, and I want to take the attacking option as I mentioned. But I've got Teddy as my vice captain. If he sort of gets a huge score against the Warriors, I'll obviously set up a loop and lock that in over Fafita. But I thought it'd be cool to go through that. Just quickly, vice captain. You can see just like how popular Cleary was as captain or vice captain. So he's like what 40, almost 45% of teams there, just over 30% with Teddy, and then everyone else is what that sort of like 10, 15 type of percent over here. I'll very quickly, I'll go through the traded out and traded in players as well. Munster injured, fair enough. Burden, I've said it before, give him another week at least. Brandon Smith could be a laid out because those ribs, but there's nothing official being said. And if he plays, he's playing the Warriors. He's gonna have to play big minutes. He's actually a good pick. So I think he's one where you have to actually like wait for final teams an hour before the game. Talau and AKP, people trading him out. It's fine, but who are you trading them to? You know, if it's like an obvious battle, if you didn't have Warbrick, for example, like fair enough, but I just don't know who you're trading these guys to. So just be wary of trading them for another cheapie who could then do badly while these guys do well the next week. Garner played 50 minutes. Panthers lost. I think it's okay to trade him out. There's probably a few others that have probably did a better job in around that price range. Law, he got concussed. So I think it's silly that people are trading out a Kashi that got concussed. Like just keep him in your team. Let him have one more week. See how he goes. Going into traded in, I think Asako and Tabuai Fido wait one more week. They're not going to increase in prices after this round. It would be after the round after that. So you're not losing anything. You get a free shot at looking at how they go. Game 2 for the Dolphins. Are they actually going to be competitive? Was that one off? Dewey, if you don't have him, fair enough. He gunned it. He looked good. I get it. Hopgood's the same. Like, don't even think. Just trade him in. Just he'd be the number one trading for people that don't have him. Ponga, I think, got one or two good attacking plays. Almost got a try. It was just held up by Nakul Klokstad last week at fullback. So Ponga could have a really good game actually. So if you don't have him already, fair enough. If you want to trade him in, as I said, King got huge stats last week. Fair enough if you're trading him in. And Ilias, he had one amazing game. I wouldn't be going off that. Be wary of bringing him in. I think that's it for Supercoach there. My Supercoach team, as I mentioned, I am not as good or knowledgeable about Supercoach. I'm relatively happy with my team, but I kind of play Supercoach in an NRL fantasy style and end up like not doing very well, to be honest. With this team, I've actually got no trades at the moment. Like I might end up making one, but I'm pretty happy with everything, to be honest. Like if there's someone that I've obviously missed, let me know maybe in the comments or in the Discord. But I've got Olakawatu missing this week. Trindle, who when they're playing weaker teams, I'd be happy to play him if Hines isn't back. My backs are crap, but I don't really have the money to do anything about it. I went into the season knowing that they'll be crap because I wanted Tapine, Haas, Tino, Fafita, Carrigan, and Olakawatu actually in my forwards, knowing and I actually had Cleary and Teddy as well. Like I knew that I had like a guns and cheapies approach, and I was happy to live with that. Aside from that, I think we're all good for round 2. So look, we're gonna sort of have this video as a YouTube video. We're gonna pull it out to an Anchor podcast. You can listen to it on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts as well. There's also gonna be a written, like a really short and sharp written version of this as well. And our sort of thought process with this is like the first 2 or 3 rounds, it'll just be me talking through teams and talking through what's going on NRL Fantasy and NRL Supercoach. But we've got around 70 people in both competitions in our open league, where we had the $500 in prizes up for grabs by the end of the season. So obviously, please get involved on our Discord and our socials. And from next week, if you do have any questions, let us know because we'll start actually addressing those. And I've kind of gone through teams and fantasy and Supercoach to kind of go through who the most popular traded out guys are. And obviously that should sort of help you hopefully, and obviously let us know if you've got any other opinions. But for next week, we'll start getting a little bit more specific when cash rises start coming in, Supercoach prices start to change, and fantasy will know a lot more after the second game, and forward pack rotations and who teams are preferring on left and right sides and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll go through all of that next week. But again, check out our Linktree if you want to join our socials, our Discord. It's all free. Got that Google spreadsheet that I'll update and a whole heap of other resources as well. Good luck for round 2, guys, and I'll catch you next week.